Okay, so at this time, we're going to go ahead and move forward with our next presentation. We're going to bring the Kroll folks online. I believe they're joining us virtually to offer us an opportunity to hear the final update regarding the independent report on the Austin Police Department Training Academy. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us to speak with the Public Safety Committee today. With me today is Rick Brown. I think you can see him on the screen, and Dan Linsky. So I know we've had an opportunity to speak with all of you before, and it's a pleasure to be in front of you again.
We're happy you're here with us. I want to offer you, just real quick, we are sort of running behind today. I don't want to take away any of the substance, but I would like very much, I know you're all dynamic, eloquent speakers, but I'd like very much for the presentation to be succinct and really get the key information that we need from the presentation while we have you.
Absolutely. I mean, I have about a 15-minute overview of our report from February of this year, which I can go through, or if you want us to just open it up for questions, we can do that too, whatever your preference is.
I'll check in with my colleagues, but for what it's worth, we have the presentation, so I wonder if, colleagues, is anybody opposed to us just jumping right into our questions and really utilizing the 15 minutes to be able to interact directly, and then we can follow up further for the, any other questions about the presentation? I'll just sort of show of hands. Are you comfortable with us moving forward with questions? Councilmember Kelly, Councilmember Tovo, and Mayor Pro Tem Alter. Mayor Pro Tem Alter?
I would very much like them to go over the implementation slides with respect to the pieces that are not done yet, for the part that was recommended at the end of their report but had not yet been implemented.
Okay, and so that sounds like we'll go over the implementation component and then move into questions. And if we want to adjust any more, please just feel free to raise your hand, colleagues. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just share my slides for a minute, and I'll jump to the portion that Councilmember Alter, Mayor Pro Tem Alter, had asked for. And just as I'm doing that, let me just say that, just by way of reminder, of course, we had the assessment of the Academy that we did back in April of 2021, where we had a number of short-term and long-term recommendations. And for purposes of being an independent evaluator, which with Council's blessing, we were appointed on May 7th, our job really was to independently verify APD's implementation of the Kroll recommendations and to assess how effectively the Academy considers racial and gender equity, emphasizes de-escalation, incorporates community perspectives, and trains resilient officers through adult learning instruction. So these slides that you have, are kind of highlights of the major findings and observations from our report, but as we get to slide 24, where I'm at now, this was implementation of the Kroll short-term recommendations. So the vast majority of the really almost all of the short-term recommendations were completed, and the only exceptions really were increased use of external subject matter or content experts. So there were a number of courses in the 144th Cadet class where they did use external subject matter experts to either teach or co-teach the classes. So one example, for example, was the new course on the history of police and race in America, which was actually taught by Dr. Kevin Foster at the University of Texas. And he was assisted by Felicia Williams, who was also a professor and a former police officer. There were other courses such as LGBTQ and transgender, which were taught not by external subject matter experts, but by essentially internal officers with specialized expertise and experience in those areas. And then there were a number of other courses that included help from victim services and some other areas as well. However, we've always felt that there's a need to have more content experts. And so that was something that the APD leadership and the Academy staff had agreed to do. There has been some reluctance on the part of staff to kind of buy into that concept, although I know the division manager and commander are working currently to add to the content experts in the 145th Cadet class. The other short-term recommendation that's still a work in progress is developing and expanding mentorship programs. It clearly had not been really robustly expanded in the last cadet class. They did have a good mentorship for women cadets. They had a mentorship program to some extent with the Texas Peace Officers Association for cadets of color, but it was unclear how meaningful that program was and other ways to expand it really essentially to all cadets would be something I think they need to work towards. So that was the other area. But all of the other short-term recommendations that are in our report, and this is all outlined in section 3 of our report, have been completed. As far as the long-term recommendations, the majority of these have been completed. However, there's still a number of them that are work in progress. Academy staff leadership has committed to completing and implementing the long-term recommendations at some time during the 145th Cadet class or fiscal year 2022. One area is a work in progress that's actually probably gone a little bit backwards is the increased diversity of Academy staff. They were in the process of supposed to develop a long-term plan to increase diversity among staff, at least at the supervisory ranks. Academy supervision has become less diverse. There's actually been a lot of turnover since the 144th. And while they have some very good people in those positions, it's my understanding that they've actually lost a little bit of diversity at the supervisory ranks at the Academy. As far as developing and incorporating additional content on procedural justice and adopting an effective peer intervention training program, they are working on that and are supposed to be doing that for the 145th and have committed to doing so. I couldn't tell you where they are at this present time, but as of February, they had not yet completed those. And additionally, researching ways to incorporate more training on cognitive decision-making and emotional intelligence skills, as well as complying with we had about 4 additional recommendations in the field training officer program that had not been completed at the time of our report in February. And so those are also marked as in progress. We also had a number of recommendations in our interim report in October. And we have all but 2 of those as completed. I would say the one that's completed with qualifications, which was the adjusting the timing and scheduling of Community Connect, which is they had the 2-week community orientation program at the start of the 144th Cadet class. It was a very well done program. It was the first time that they had ever done something like that. They've agreed, they've included it in the scheduling of the 145th. The only thing they've done, however, partly at our recommendation based on cadet and staff feedback, was to adjust the timing of some of that to work it into later in the Academy schedule, because the feeling was that it would be more effective to have some of those community programs after the cadets had been oriented into the expectations of being a cadet and had a little bit more insight into what being a police officer is all about, so that their participation in those programs would be more meaningful. And I think, so that's been done as far as adjusting the timing. The only caveat we would note is that they've actually reduced the amount of Community Connect in the 145th. So it had been a 2-week program. Now it's essentially a 5-day program. However, they also have the 2 days of groundwater analysis, racial equity training in addition to the 5 days, and they've added some cadet ride-out programs. The other 2 recommendations in the interim report that haven't been fully addressed is the staffing needs of the Learned Skills Unit and the improvements to academy facilities. We understand those are, at least the improvement to facilities is more of a long-term prospect, and that's going to require city approval and involvement as well, and budgetary considerations. And finally, we did have some additional recommendations and further adjustments that we've recommended in our final report, including developing and expanding the internal video library, adding cadet survey questions at the end of the academy class on de-escalation principles to ensure that those principles have been reinforced properly and emphasized to the right extent. We also suggested that additional criteria should be added to field training officer selection, which would include a commitment to community policing and building community relationships. And then we also have some recommendations on the physical training program and time management. The only other thing I would add is we did submit, and hopefully you've all received a copy of the audit protocol guidelines that we helped develop subsequent to the final report. We worked with the division manager on that, and that's an important component, I think, to address the long-term sustainability of the reform measures and the implemented recommendations. Now that Kroll or no one else is on from the outside is there as an evaluator or doing any kind of independent assessment of the 145th, it's important that APD internally have a procedure in place to ensure that they're complying with and continuing to implement effectively these recommendations. And so we work with the division manager to develop those protocols. I know she has agreed and is working on complying with them. But it will be important, I think, for council or for this committee and the city manager's office to hold the department accountable for implementing the guidelines and reporting back to you all to make sure that they've complied with them. So that's just a quick run through. Probably better to just open it up for questions at this point, and we're happy to take any questions you have.
Is your hand raised, Councilmember Kelly? And then Councilmember Kelly and Mayor Pro Tem Alter.
Thank you. I know that we didn't review slide number 3, but I do know that you mentioned buy-in lacking among staff. Could you help us understand what that means and possibly provide some examples?
Sure. So what we had noted was the implemented the reforms and the recommendations that we had made were implemented in good faith with a few exceptions we just went over. I mean, all of it was done in good faith, but not all of them were completed. But certainly APD leadership was committed to and had agreed to all of the recommendations, and were working in good faith to comply with them. However, we noted in our report that a military style culture still essentially predominates at the academy, and that we did notice a lack of buy-in by some academy staff to some of the changes. So, for example, in midway through the academy, there had been a cadet survey, and it indicated that there had been some comments made by academy staff that mocked the reimagining policing concept, that and some of the community engagement aspects of the academy. There was the notion or kind of the statements that community engagement were not, quote unquote, actual policing training, actual police training, or detracted from police training. There were many cadets who I think came across and and I can only believe that it came to some extent from staff comments, came across was the belief that, all of the added community engagement programming and some of the further emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion were not, quote unquote, actual police training or detracted from police training. When in fact, they actually had more training than any prior cadet class overall, in the sense that all of the prior, tactical and conventional training this cadet class received, but on top of that, they received enhanced community engagement and other important programming. So the lack of buy-in was it's not so much that there's, any strong resistance to it, but just some things that we had heard and some feedback we got both from staff and from cadets that, there's still some work to be done, I think, for some of the rank and file staff members to really, buy into change. Change is difficult. I'm sure Mr. Linsky and Mr. Brown can talk about that in the context of policing. But I'll just leave it at that unless there's...
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I see that we've identified the problem. I'm wondering if, in your expert opinions, as the consultants that we've hired to oversee this independent review, if you might have any suggestions on how we may turn this into something more positive and help our staff over there buy more into the process.
So I think, as Mark mentioned, that's a process that takes time. So police officers hate two things. They hate any change, and of course, they hate the way things are. However, once they get into it, and that's kind of, the culture has changed, and there's supervision and direction, and they realize that it's not as bad as they thought, they get with the program. And I think we saw that here. Some of the staff who were more resistant to, say, the thought of a civilian director, asking information and giving requests for things to be done, and push back. And I think some have self-selected and have gone to new assignments with the APD, and some might have been transferred by supervisory personnel as well. So I think the main point is that we flagged that, and that the supervision of the academy and the department are focused on making sure they maintain the changes and, support those who want to be creative and help reimagine the policing experience out there, and, do what needs to be done with those who don't wish to get on the program.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question, Chair. I have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to parse it down to these in the interest of time. So on slides 20 and 21 of your presentation, the topic of separations during the Cadet Academy was addressed. And of the reasons for separation, COVID-19 was mentioned. It looks like we lost about 5 cadets because of COVID, who otherwise went through a very rigorous process to be accepted into this program. So I'm wondering if you know what APD has done to adapt to the pandemic and to allow cadets to continue after exposure and quarantine from COVID-19.
Well, I think the Academy staff actually did a good job later in the Academy with dealing with COVID-19. So for example, 18 cadets tested positive in late December and early January for COVID, as did a number of staff members and instructors. So the 5 cadets who I think had to ultimately be separated because of lost time to COVID-19 quarantine protocols, that all happened in the first half of the Academy, when I think everybody was really trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? And by the end of the Academy, they had better protocols in place. They had, made sure everybody was masking properly with K95 masks and so forth, at least when they were in the classroom. And they were had adopted some procedures and protocols to give a little more flexibility. I know they had to shift some of the defensive tactics training at the end. They delayed it by 3 weeks so that, those that had COVID wouldn't miss that and would be able to take those tests, because, if they couldn't, they wouldn't have been able to graduate. So I think they did address it, and I suspect going into the 145th that they are prepared to deal with in a more flexible way with cadets who, if any, do get COVID in this new cadet class, they'll be able to deal with it more effectively.
Well, thank you so much for explaining that. I would also say that you all provided a final report in report length to the council, and when the cadets visited me here at City Hall and you all wrote about that in your report, you did misspell my name. So I just wanted to flag that for you all. I can't remember the page number it's on, but thank you for mentioning it. It was a very interesting discussion that I had with them, letting them know what we do at City Hall here as council members, and that the work that we do helps support the work that they do. So with that, I will let someone else ask questions. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So I appreciate all the work that you've done, gentlemen, and your whole Kroll team throughout this process that we set in motion. I think the very precise nature of the recommendations, the logic and the sense behind them, and the clear articulation has been very helpful as we try to make some real transformative changes. And I believe that we now have leadership in place that's leaning into it. And the roadmap and the guidance has been really important. It is still a work in progress. I only saw the audit protocol guidelines a few minutes before this meeting, so I've only looked at them a little bit. And you and I had an opportunity, or several of you and I had an opportunity to meet at length about the more detailed report. I got a lot of my questions answered there, but one of the things that we kept coming back to was, how are we going to keep holding the training academy accountable? How are we going to make sure we as council have the information that we need? And so I think this protocol, you touch on each of the points, you ask very specific questions, and I think it's about as a good a setup as we could have going into this next phase where you won't be there to look at it specifically. We may have to iterate after that, as we see what comes back. I did want to understand better the reporting process for the part that's going to come to the Public Safety Committee or to Commission or to Council. What format that's in? Is that a combination of an oral and written report? Or is it just an oral report? Or is that sort of, let's do the audit and figure that out as we get there to see what makes sense? So if you could speak to that, please.
I think we were probably, and this may have been in our interaction with the division manager, didn't specify precisely what format that reporting should take place in. I think that's really between council and the Public Safety Committee and academy leadership. I think it could be whatever format and level of reporting you would prefer. I think would be something you could request. I think we wanted to make sure the protocols had a reporting component in it, which was so that there was the accountability process, so that they would be reporting to council and Public Safety Committee at the end of each academy class, and that they had to do so within 30 days. But what format that reporting takes, I think, is really up to you and the committee and APD.
And just to clarify, it's the Public Safety Commission, which is not, this is the Public Safety Committee. The commission is folks that we've appointed to serve.
You meant to say
as an advisory.
I think we
you said it in here as the Public Safety Commission, which I think is the right place to have another, and then to council, which may or may not come through this committee. But that's just being specific on that. For me, I would err on the side of, especially for this next class and the completion of the 145th, to be, particularly more thorough. Just really to my colleagues, we have come a long way. There's still more work to be done. And part of how we keep the momentum that we have is us keeping our eye on the ball and us focusing in and making sure that we're following these kinds of details. And that will be harder without sort of the very specific report. So I think when it does come back, hopefully it will come back to the full council, but if it doesn't, and it is to the Public Safety Committee, I think we need to make sure that we are really inviting our colleagues to come and that we are really diving into those details at that point, because we've invested a lot. We've had a lot of people who have really leaned in, and I think it's important that as a council, we take these next steps to make sure that we can continue the momentum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellis?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about where the conversation lies with expansion or potential expansion of facilities. I know there's been some discussion around not just the police department, but other public safety trainees needing access to either improved facilities or potentially more buildings or portables to be able to have their lessons completed. Can you tell me where that conversation is right now?
I think it's our understanding that there is a proposal that the police department has for new facilities, enhanced facilities, that's police, fire, and EMS. And that might be sitting at the city manager's office with your capital improvements project program, wherever that might be. That was our last understanding of that.
Councilmember Ellis, if I could just cut in real quick, we did get the results back from the resolution that I sponsored in February related to the public safety vacancy staffing plan, and it does a 5-page report, some of the needs that city staff has identified for additional training. So it's a pretty lengthy report. It took some time to get through over the weekend, but it does address that.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to co-sponsor that with you. So I'm glad that you were taking the lead on that. And I look forward to furthering that conversation about, is that coming as a CIP recommendation? Does it need any council approval, just so we can help make sure that if that's truly the issue with helping to make sure our folks can have the lessons and training that they need, that we appropriately take action on that.
Any other questions, colleagues? So one of the questions that I have, it's going to be pretty broad. I'd like to know, aside from the information that has been produced in the report, I think ultimately you were responding to information that we requested. Is there any information that is not included in the report that you think we should be taking into consideration as we move forward?
I don't know specifically. I think we tried to be as comprehensive as we could, frankly, in all of our reports. But I would say that, and this was a follow-on of our Kroll of the assessment report back in April,
Right.
and the specific recommendations that were in there, and what our scope of work was as independent evaluators. So it's based on our 300 plus hours of classroom and instructional observations, both in person and virtually, in case of some of the classroom instruction, as well as talking with community participants, city people, staff, cadets, reviewing weekly staff reports and other documentation, lesson plans. So it's based on all of that information in our kind of independent assessment and evaluation of how the academy proceeded over that 8-month time. So we tried to be, I'm sure if there are some things we didn't address, would apologize for that, but I think we tried to be as comprehensive as we could, and certainly hit all of the areas that we had discussed in our original assessment.
If I can chime in on that, one of the things that we, with all these reports that we did, keep in mind with our Phase B report, we added some additional recommendations involving training. And some of that directly relates to some of the encounters we saw in the use of force, to stop and frisk, reasonable suspicion, the constitutional provisions, and so this ties right into co-facilitating of instructing the cadets, but also instructing the supervisors, because I've actually seen documentation where a supervisor has misapplied what the constitutional requirements are, and it went straight up to chain of command and it wasn't addressed. So there's some training components in our Phase B report that link back to the academy, not only to the cadet instruction, but also to field training instruction and in-service instruction that will be helpful to reduce some of those encounters.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and it sort of touches on one of the things that I was hoping to hear you all say in terms of the gaps, right? Because I think sometimes we think about it as an ancillary consideration, but one of the things I think several of my colleagues and I brought up during the course of the conversation was leadership training. And I'm not seeing the substance that I was looking for around a real comprehensive approach to developing leaders who ultimately become those mentors. You know, I appreciate the effort by way of TPOA and the efforts around mentorship for women who are approaching employment in the service. But I guess I'm just not seeing as much as I would like to see around developing strong, capable, competent leaders who subsequently, you know, pass those skills along and really do the capacity building that I think we're going to need to address folks not liking it like it is and not liking change. I think that's going to, in order to address that part of the culture, I do believe it's something that we are going to train away, and I'm not seeing that real strong leadership component. That was a statement, but I'm happy to receive any response that you may have as a result of the statement.
Just initially, my response from looking at hundreds of force cases and investigating the issues we were looking at in Phase B, I see a void, and I hear you loud and clear. I see an opportunity to develop your mid-level leaders, your sergeants, your commanders, your lieutenants, because I feel as though in some of the areas, they're the closest to the officers in the field. They're the ones that have to take the steps to do what they need to do to correct behavior. If they're missing it there, a lot of times when it gets up to the executive level, you know, the executive level relies a lot on those mid-level commanders to handle these things. So certainly, if mid-level leadership is addressed, the accountability processes, the training gaps we've identified, that's going to also help build competent leaders at the sergeant and lieutenant commander level to enhance their abilities to move up the ranks and have that knowledge they need when it comes to enforcing policy and holding people accountable.
You articulated that more eloquently than I did, in which case I'd like for you to expand on it and tell us what recommendation you have for us to develop appropriate expectations and protocol around developing those mid-level leaders. Because I without being, you know, a part of this particular, a part of this particular field, I think that's applicable to multiple fields.
Yes, I think the biggest gap that concerned me was in the amount of cases we looked at, the misses of supervision to address constitutional issues when it came to an actual seizure, because a frisk is a seizure that leads to a pat-down search, which is a search, even though it's for weapons and not evidence. It could lead to that depending on what's found in the pat-down. That's an educational gap. And I think once supervisors, sergeants and lieutenants that are looking at these type of cases those gaps are done away with, and that training void has been fulfilled, then they become more of an active supervisor in monitoring their subordinates, because that's what they're supposed to be doing, and correcting the behavior to ensure that the citizens are getting the services that are expected of them. Constitutional policing, fair and impartial policing, those sorts of things. I think once supervisors have the tools to be able to be competent supervisors to add to their toolbox, they will become more effective as they move up the chain. Because if you have a sergeant that doesn't know how to assess an encounter when it comes to a detention and a search, that person becomes a lieutenant. They still don't got it. But if it's corrected early on, and those folks learn how to hold their officers accountable for these types of things, and that expands. All this is linked to other things, operational things in the field. That will help develop the competency and also the confidence of those officers to be a supervisor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think some of the other questions I have, I could probably send over because there's something specific that I'm trying to ask, and I haven't figured out exactly how to articulate it. I think you're getting close to what it is that I'm trying to ask you. I think I might be asking for a solution that doesn't necessarily exist yet, in which case maybe what I'm asking you is, how do we as a city that, prides itself on being innovative and forward-thinking, the amount of calls that we're getting from other cities, really wanting to emulate what it is that we've been able to produce thus far, it tells me that we have the capacity to go even further, but I'm still not quite sure how we get that piece. So to the point that you made earlier about, some of the hesitance to accept this path moving forward, the change, right? I think that carries over into that void of leadership, that mid-level leadership. Because the truth of the matter is, I think that's the space where I think you guys call it setting the tone in the report. I think that's where you're setting the tone and really indicating that. I think what I'm trying to say is, I think the hesitation to accept the change inherently puts us in a position to where the city and the department aren't allies from the start. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, accepted, and presented to cadets coming in, and recognizing that a part of the culture that needs to, sort of just go away, like smoking on airplanes, is that inherent othering that we do between policymakers and the folks, the rank and file. And so that leadership void, for me, I think a part of that is that part where we really, on my brother, when they played basketball, you hear the coach holler at same team, and I think if we could do that for our cadets and really get them to recognize, same team, guys, we're all moving towards the same goal. There's not, some boogeyman at City Hall who's trying to inhibit your ability to do your job well. There's people at City Hall who have to create policies and respond when the citizens, the residents of the city of Austin ask us questions about how the service is being provided. And I'd like very much for us to have more clear, open, authentic conversation and relationships between the entities, and it won't happen without that missing part. But I'll stop there. I think I'll figure out a better way to really ask the question I'm trying to ask.
Well, let me just throw this out as a last thought. There is training available for mid-level supervisors out there, and sometimes police officers only know what they know from what's inside their own agency. But once you get exposed, I think about my career path. I went to the FBI National Academy as a captain. You could go there. Some departments send their sergeants and lieutenants there, and they get to interact with other leaders across the country and learn they get to learn there's other ways to do things and broaden their horizons that way. So there is, hopefully the academy will look at that, but there is some training opportunities out there available for mid-level supervisors.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly, did I see your hand?
You did, and thank you for the recognition. I agree with you that there is definitely a disconnect, especially in public safety, with the work that we do as policymakers and then it actually being implemented. But I also think that's a great opportunity for us as policymakers to have those discussions with the people that are impacted by the actions that we're taking here on council. I know that it'll create a lot more transparency and just the invitation to have a discussion about something that maybe we don't know a lot about, and just to relate to them and understand where they're coming from, I found is really helpful. So I appreciate you bringing that up and raising it as a point. I look forward to us having those discussions with those groups.
I agree, and I think what I was trying to say ultimately is I want leadership to encourage that, because as it stands, I think there would be an inherent mistrust or hesitation.
Right.
And I think having people that you trust encourage that will get us closer.
And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from officers or even EMS workers in particular, they don't want to talk to us because they've been told they're not allowed to.
Right.
I do not like that one bit. I mean, we're here so that we can understand those particulars that they go through every day at their job, and to help make their jobs and lives easier and make their quality of life better. And I feel like all city staff should be able to come to us with their problems or even some of the great things that happen, so we can celebrate those moments together. So Thank
Yeah, I
you.
don't disagree at all. Thank you. Any other?
If I could just,
Go ahead,
for
please.
both, yeah, I think it merges both. I think, you're right, it's leadership. It's also, it's a strategic plan on how you obtain the goals. And oftentimes, as a chief, I would come up with policy, and I would tell people what the policy is. And then I would request supervisors enforce my policy. And sometimes I wound up in situations where, the supervisors would push back on they would enforce the policy or they wouldn't enforce the policy. And then when I got on the supervisor, they would enforce it. But that also actually resulted in resentment and misunderstanding. One of the programs I did at Boston was called the Code 19. And I asked my cops every day, if you can, park your police car, get out of your police car, and just walk in the neighborhood for an hour. Engage people, talk with them, find out what they're doing, find out what their needs are, and just get out and meet the community. We teach you so well how to deal with, bad guys, so to speak, where we, teach you how to speak and blade yourself and be defensive. We never taught our cops how to engage, effectively with good citizens and not in adversarial relationships. So that was a program I tried to put in place, and I measured it each week at ComStat. Well, that turned out to, walk and talk turned out to, I would hear cops go off on the walk and talk, and I would go, that's great. I'll go out and walk with them, and I'd pull my car over and find them parked in the car, but not getting out of the car, right? So they were checking a box so that they could count it and say, well, they want us to do this thing, but there's no real supervision. So then I would say to the sergeants, why would one of your officers think that they could possibly do that? That you mustn't be a good supervisor, you must don't have a relationship with them if they think they can do that on your watch. Like, they embarrassed you, Sergeant, that they did that, right? And so then the sergeants were like, okay, you can't do that anymore. You guys got to get out of the car and do your walk and talks, and we're going to hold you accountable. And then I was doing a ride along with a young patrolman. He goes, look, I get the walk and talks. I agree with it. But why am I out at 4 a.m. in February in West Roxbury when there's no citizens out? And, why am I just walking a street for checking a box? And I said, no, why would you do that? That makes no sense at all. He said, well, that's because they say you count them, Chief, and we have to count them. We got to get so many of them. And if we get caught in our car, they're going to yell at us. And I had to have a conversation with the sergeant, say, I brought them all to headquarters and had a conversation, say, look, do you realize the goal of this? We want to actually make our cops have a better relationship with the community who are sitting on juries, who are witnesses in crimes, who will be more likely to come forward and give us information. And here's one of the ways I think we can do it. And don't just check the box. And I gave them the example of 4 o'clock. Why would we waste that officer's time and energy and put them through a miserable experience when we could have them out at 6 o'clock in the morning when the commuters are going to and from the commuter station and kids need to be crossed across the street and people out and about during those times. And, we don't have to just do it for the sake of checking a box. But I found where I failed sometimes is coming up with a good policy and program and not explaining the why to the supervisor responsible for it. When I have worked with supervisors and they have had their ability to put their input in, because oftentimes my policies are flawed, and they can think of ways that more effectively can work on the street. When they buy into the why, they will change that culture and do the result, and we will no longer have smoking on airlines, just as you said, because people understand it, they explain it, they feel like their voices are heard, and there's a reason for it. So I think a strategic planning process of exactly what the policies and procedures you're trying to do, and engaging the supervisors in the why you're doing them and why it's important to do them would be helpful to any police department in America today that's trying to make culture change.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Colleagues, do we have any other questions before we move on to our next report or briefing? I don't believe so. Thank you for coming back and offering us an opportunity to go through this final report. We've appreciated our interaction with you along the way, and hopefully have the opportunity to follow up with y'all as needed.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.